Welcome back, everybody, to Rain on Your Parade with J.O. Cauvin. I'm J.O. Cauvin here in the home studio, and just a few things to talk about. You'll probably see it's a pretty long episode, but that's because it's just a really great, incredible, important discussion with author Brian Goldstone and his book about the working homeless in America. There is no place for us. So I'll try to keep this to a relative minimum. There will still be a special review at the end of the episode. So same format, just with this is like if you went to a deli and said, I want triple the meat in my sandwich. And that meat is a long, sometimes humorous, very deep discussion about homelessness in America. So I think it's a number 4 on your JL Deli order. I guess a lot of big news. First off, I want to start off as a longtime Pixar fan. Okay, I know there's bombs dropping in Iran and there's trans people having their rights stripped from them, but Pixar, obviously, that's the nation's pulse as far as I'm concerned. And Pixar is such a perfect example. We talk about private equity, Brian and I, during the discussion, but Disney almost private equity'd Pixar. Pixar was like its own thing. It was like a division of Disney, and it got kind of did its own thing. They were like, yeah, let Pixar be Pixar. And all they did was make like an unbelievable string of borderline perfect movies, just incredible, thought-provoking, hilarious, great animation. From Toy Story in 95. And then all of a sudden Disney bought them. And I forget what year Disney bought them, but Disney made it very clear that they were going in a different direction because they immediately were like, first movie, Cars 2. Cars 2. Cars 1 is a sort of middle of the road Pixar movie. It's not bad at all, but it's a very middle of the road. I mean, talking cars is not the biggest imagination stretch for an animated movie. But Cars 1 was good. Cars 2, I think, is considered maybe the worst Pixar movie ever, but it was like clearly Disney was like, okay. It reminds me of the time when I went to the WWF, at the time restaurant in Times Square. Now the organization is known as the WWE. But I went to the WWF restaurant. At the time, I was a huge fan. This is like college. And the food was delicious. It was bar food, but it was delicious. It was overpriced memorabilia restaurant, but the bar food was excellent. And I remember ordering a chicken tenders appetizer, and it was like 12 delicious tenders. I was like, is this an entree? And then I told people, I was like, we got to go back. We got to go back. I'm telling you, it's awesome. If you like bar food, we'll watch a game there. And then when we went back, I got 4 shitty tenders. Everything was smaller. And I was like, what's happening here? And the waiter actually said, oh, WWF took over the restaurant. They had like franchised it and they saw it was successful. I was like, waiter, why do you know all this? And then they sort of were like, great, we have a gold mine. Now let's strip it down. Let's give people a cheaper product and make more money. And then the restaurant closed, which is saying something because Bubba Gump Shrimp Company restaurant is still open and thriving at Times Square. So the idea that you couldn't make a WWE theme restaurant work, but Bubba Gump Shrimp Company, the 5th most important character who dies in Forrest Gump, his restaurant still thriving. Very strange. But I feel like Disney did that to Pixar. They were like, oh, they're so good. Well, now let's start doing things that can be franchisable and merchandisable. So it was like cars, you can sell the cars and all this. So they've had some hits with sequels. Toy Story being the exception, though when they made Toy Story 4, that was kind of what are you doing? Toy Story 3 was the perfect ending. That said, I did love Toy Story 4. I feel like there is a floor to how bad the Toy Story movies can be because you have such great vocal talent, such a great backstory, such great animation. So it's like you could probably keep pumping out Toy Stories for a while and still make really good movies because the floor is so low. But sometime, and I think Inside Out brought this out. Now, I always thought Inside Out, the first one, was one of the most, if not the most overrated Pixar movie. I don't think it's bad at all, but I do think it's overrated. That was the movie that brought in, whether it was to be apolitical or they had done some market testing or research, blobs, inoffensive glowing blobs became kind of the thing for Pixar. Oh, look, it's glowing blobs. Nobody can be offended by that. We've done our research, and it seems that 92% of Americans and their kids find glowing blobs to be the most inoffensive structure and apolitical form possible. So you had Inside Out, Glowing Blobs, but that was Inside Out was a good movie. I just think it's overrated, but it is for sure good. But then you had like Onward, which was just that was a pandemic one, but that had a good ending, but it was just a very mediocre movie. That was like Purple Blobs. But then you had like Elemental come out a few years ago. That stunk. I thought Luca sucked. People tried to talk up Luca. No, not Luca stunk. It was like, and then Soul came out, and I was like, ooh, Pixar movie about a black jazz musician. That'll probably be really interesting. Even though I don't like jazz, I'd love to see what Pixar does with jazz. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to kill the black guy 10 minutes in, and guess what he's going to be for about 80% of the movie? A blue blob. So I didn't think enough people complained about Soul, to be honest. Where it was like, finally, a lead black character in Pixar and jazz, how interesting. And then it was like he falls in a sewer and then he's a blue blob for most of the movie. Um, and then you get to what was a more recent one? There's another Blue Blob movie, and for some reason I'm forgetting it. And then they came out with this one, Elio, which I assume is the story of French bread microwavable pizzas, but it had the worst opening in Pixar history. Now there was one Pixar film amidst this really horrible downturn in the last decade. It's almost like it's like Trump showed up and Pixar tanked. I don't know, that is probably just correlation, but there was one gem almost by accident in Pixar's last 10 years, and of course that's Coco. And Coco actually didn't do great at the box office either, at least domestically, relative to Pixar's strength. But Coco is a Mount Rushmore Pixar film. Um, and they've been talking about making a Coco sequel, though I would say that Robert Iger is going to probably go, in light of DEI and Trump hating our guts and us being scared and loving lots of money, we're going to shelve Coco too. It's the one time we're not going to try and franchise something when it's the Latino character. We're thinking more, how about Nemo has a cousin that we've never seen, and we're thinking about doing Finding Nemo's Cousin. That, by the way, Finding Nemo, one of my Mount Rushmore. It's one of my favorite Pixar movies. The sequel, sadly, not that good. So that was disappointing. But watching Elio fail miserably, I said, good. No offense to the people who worked on that. I'm sure they worked really hard, but it looked like it looked like, it looked like a piece of shit Pixar movie. It looked like we've got some blobs and some blorbs and a kid and outer space, and who doesn't love aliens and blue? Our research says blobs are big. There's a blue blob in the commercial. And not to be confused with Blue Bloods, which my mom is very sad is leaving or has left CBS. She was in that core demographic for Blue Bloods. I shouldn't say core demographic. Age-wise, she's in the demographic. There's probably a lot more conservatives who watch Blue Bloods and are like, yeah, that's policing. But I'm sort of happy. I think Pixar, I don't know if they're tanking for a good draft pick or something. They're like, we had Coco. He was a franchise player, and he didn't get it done, so now we're tanking for the next Woody and Buzz Lightyear in the draft. But it is awful what they've done to Pixar. And I remember reading reviews of Elio, and it was, you always hate to hear these reviews where it's like, while not a top tier Pixar film, and then I'm like, goodbye. I know you're probably doing what I would do, which is I love Pixar. Pixar has 20 years of goodwill banked, but they have been on this quest I don't know what they're doing. I don't know if it's like a producers thing or like Major League. The Producers is a famous comedy where they wanted to make a failure so that they could reap more money with a failure. Major League is a sports comedy about a team that wants to lose so they can move the team to Florida from Cleveland. Just in case my obscure references. Oh, there goes JL going Dennis Miller all of a sudden talking about two revered film comedies. But Pixar, if this gets you through, if you start to learn that you've got to just get back to the basics, I don't know how you have a 20-year run of excellence and then all of a sudden decide we're going to just be shit for a decade. Somebody needs to get fired. Somebody in creative, maybe it's the guy John Lasseter. Can we have this discussion, folks? You didn't think Me Too was going to come for Pixar, but this is maybe an example of it going too far. Okay, not to get all Bill Maher. I certainly don't want to do that. But John Lasseter, from what I read, I think he belongs maybe in that Al Franken company of the guys who shouldn't have maybe been victimized by Me Too. Maybe they were like slap on the wrist and continue doing what you're doing kind of offenders. But he was touchy feely and kind of huggy, but not like Chris. He wasn't like the Andrew Cuomo touchy feely, where it's like, I'm rubbing your back and now my hand is creeping down your tramp stamp and getting a little bit of the curvature of your booty, ventilator. It might have just been like, hey, he's too like, good to see you. I don't know. I don't remember all the allegations, but I just remember it being like inappropriate, but it didn't really resonate as like, oh my God, this guy's sexually harassing everybody kind of offense. But once he left, it seems like they lost the Pixar version of Steve Jobs, maybe. So maybe it's time, 10 years away. He's been languishing with some animated films at Apple that weren't that great. Maybe it's just time to say, you know what? For the kids, and by kids, I mean 46-year-olds who love Pixar, maybe you should reconcile and start making some better content because Elio, I hope Elio is the wake up call, to be honest. And I'm not nothing against the people who made that film, but I looked at it and said, oh, another bullshit Pixar movie, another store brand Pixar. It's like Pixelate. When you can't afford Pixar movies, you get a big bag of cereal called Pixelate. Kids love Pixelate because it's cheap and it kind of looks like Pixar. So that's my take on Elio. That's right, folks. I came in and you didn't think I was going to take down Pixar and criticize the Me Too movement, but that's why you come to rain on your parade. You don't come here for sunshine. You don't come here for a fall breeze. You come here for the rain, and the rain has been brought. Now, on other issues, not a shock that Trump has, used the trans issue to do all sorts of things. So it went from the kids to the sports to the military to getting rid of specialized hotlines with the suicide prevention hotline, etc. Not a shock. Everything he's doing, he kind of telegraphed. You just had to be willfully ignorant or actually want that, or to be just so in your own world that you ignored it. But he bombed Iran, which has some people on the right upset, has some people on the left upset. I've been saying for a few years that Congress, needs to start really, and this is a both parties thing, just if you are a constitutional type person, Congress really needs to get the reins back from government. And I think we are lazy as a country. I think a lot of people would admit in this country, you know what I really want? I want a dictator who agrees with me. That's kind of where we're at. And you know me, I am not a both sides. I am not in the la la land of it's both sides. No. It's like 93% Republicans are the problem with this country. And they're looking to increase their share. They're not happy at 93%. They're like, what if we were 100% of the problem in this country? But I think that we need to rein in the presidency. And this is a both sides issue. I'm not saying both sides are equally at fault for the effect of their policies, not even close. But in terms of both parties should be saying, yeah, Congress needs to own this. And I think a lot of Republicans in Congress are happy to not be blamed, to take the wins and to ride Trump's wave and then be blame free if things go wrong. Because it's like, I didn't vote on it. I backed the president. Maybe the president could have done something differently. But it allows Congress to avoid responsibility for the horrible decisions that are made when they are the decisions that they should be making. And I think it's time, and trust me, when Obama was president, when Biden was president, I'm sure I had fewer complaints. I can see clearly now that, is Donald Trump bombing Iran without authority? Is that something that if it wasn't Donald Trump would be less angry about? Probably. A lot of people would be less angry about it, I think. Or it would be a flip side. It doesn't mean people are wrong to be angry now. It probably would be a reversal. Maybe not as stark, but if Obama or Biden were sending these bombs, you might see a reversal in who's complaining. But Congress needs to take more control. And this country, in so many ways, we want quick solutions. We don't want long-term thinking. And having a strong president, one way or the other, whatever party, is convenient and easy. It's easy for us as voters and citizens, and it's easy for people in Congress to sort of go like, hey, if people like this, I can get credit for it. And if people don't like it, I'm not responsible because I didn't vote on it. I kind of allowed the president to take a lot of my congressional responsibilities. And I think we do that in both sides. And it's time for Congress to start taking the lead again. The president will always be the leader and the figurehead of our government. And there's a lot of responsibility constitutionally prescribed to the president. But we've definitely given more and more and more to the presidency now. So I think Donald Trump should make it clear to people that how far a president with unchecked power can go. But it means kind of reining in the presidency as an institution, I think. And like with many things, you may not like it when Obama or Biden get restrained, or the future Obama or the future Biden get restrained, but those restraints are there to restrain the Trumps as well. That's why you allow the restraints on your guy, because they will be restraints on the other guy. So that's that. And then what was the other thing? The bombs in Iran, the trans. We did it. So yeah, I hope this wasn't too long. It's a little longer than I wanted to, but I do have some gigs coming up, folks. They'll be on my calendar soon. But Newark, August 1st. St. Catharines, Ontario, a fundraiser show that I'm headlining as myself and as Trump. Saturday, August 23rd at a club, and this will be on my website very soon, but just mark your calendars if you're one of my many Canadian fans. St. Catharines, Ontario, August 23rd. Looking for more gigs, be posting those, etc. And as far as we talk at the end of this conversation, Brian and I, about my potential future getting into politics, maybe. I appreciate the enthusiasm of people. I am not going to be super focused on that just yet. Mikey Sherrill is running for governor in this state, and I think, although I think she will win, that is not a slam dunk. And having a MAGA governor in the state I just moved to would really suck. Maybe not for me necessarily, but for a lot of people. And so Mikey Sherrill, I think I'm going to go to a fundraiser on July 1st. I'm going to start to gear a lot of what I do really on the goal at hand, which is electing Mikey Sherrill. What happens after that is going to be probably the Democratic Wild Wild West in my district. But for now, she is favored, but I'm going to start gearing some of the things I do video wise and posting and appearances on podcasts to really keep the focus on that. Because the consequences for me personally, if she loses, are okay. I just keep doing what I'm doing. The consequences for the state of New Jersey, if she loses, are really bad. It's a really easy choice. The same way I thought Kamala Harris and Donald Trump was an easy choice. This is in many ways an easier choice, and I mean that as no disrespect to Kamala Harris. This is an easier choice. But 4 years ago, the Democrat incumbent won the vote by like 4 percentage points, which was a very narrow gap. And it's the same Republican back thinking this is third time is the charm for him, Jack Ciattarelli. So look for some New Jersey focused comedy and commentary in the next few months. And for everybody who wants me to do something and is hoping I'll do something, in the words of Jesse Jackson, keep hope alive. There's good reason to, but let's get Mikey Sherrill elected in New Jersey, for crying out loud. Because it's bad for you, me, and everybody else in the state of New Jersey if she doesn't. So, and she's a fellow Georgetown law graduate. So even though I was deeply miserable in law school, I still have to back my fellow Hoya Loya, especially because had I not gone to Georgetown Law School, had I gotten a job that made me happy and fulfilled me, I might have not gotten into comedy. I might have owned a house and had a large brood surrounding me of tall children looking at me, telling me, "Daddy, why didn't you get into comedy? You're so funny." And I'd say, "I chose to be happy. That's why." And then we all laugh, closing credits. So without further ado, thank you. If you're a new watcher, thank you. Subscribe on YouTube or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Please, folks, let's get those 5-star reviews going to Spotify and Apple. And we'll be right back after this break with an incredible conversation with a great author of an incredible book right after this. Okay, everybody, my show has not been canceled. We've made it to episode 2, and no offense to any guests I will ever have, but our guest this week is somebody that I am really proud to have on, and his book, which if you've paid attention to my book reviews, you 40 to 80 people, this book hit me in a way that really very few, if any, books have ever hit me. So I reached out, and he was kind enough to agree to come on the show. By way of credits, I wrote down, he's an anthropology PhD from Duke. Go UNC. Can't
All right. This interview is finished.
He's a Mellon Research Fellow at Columbia. So hopefully, given the Duke background, hopefully Trump has taken away all his fellowship money by now at Columbia. Lives in Atlanta. I couldn't synthesize all the credits to sound like a professional interviewer, but this is your first book, I believe, and it's really, I think, award season. It may not get an Oscar or an Emmy, but I think it's going to be honored because it is an absolute gut punch masterpiece. There Is No Place for Us. We have the author, Brian Goldstone. Hello, Brian. Thank you for being here.
JL, it's really great to talk to you. And I just so appreciate you even picking up this book. I don't take it for granted that in a moment like now that we're living through with this kind of relentless assault from every direction, that people would have the stomach to pick up a book about such a difficult phenomenon, and that you would read it and then like say nice things about it just really means the world to me.
Well, I like to be better than other people. It's sort of my kink. And when I was reading The Atlantic, not to brag, but I saw a full page ad for it. And I said, I forget who maybe some of the blurbs were by, but I go, working and homeless. This seems like I haven't heard anything about the book yet. Like it was the ad worked because I said, I ordered it. Like 5 days later, the New York Times had a glowing review of it. And I said, look at them trying to piggyback off of my influence. Shameful.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
But
the JL.
Yeah. It's as fewer and fewer people read, my influence will grow as a percentage of book influencing. But I was in the middle of some book before it. And as soon as I was done with that, I went right to your book. And I don't know, I don't talk about a lot of books this way. So it's for people who know me, this is not sort of like, JL just loves books. This was on every level, writing, the storytelling, the policy, the way it makes you think and get enraged about policy. It was so good. And I'm going to compare it. I don't know. I don't like to watch other interviews with my guests because I just feel like I dilute my greatness by seeing what they've done. But I think I just read Abundance right before your book, the #1 best-selling Ezra Klein, Derek Thompson book, that feels like, I live in Bloomfield, New Jersey. That feels like a very Montclair, New Jersey dinner party book of like, how can we affect policy? And how can I also be part of the crowd that's in the know and is going to try and make some change and rethink the way I approach society? This is like nitty gritty. There are people in need right now. And as a result of policies and neglect and other things, these people, they are living day to day. The academic discussion, there is, like I said, great policy discussion, great sort of cause and effect breakdown of so many things that happen to the lives of the people you cover. But it is also an urgency. It is as I said in my review, and you told me off mic, you kind of like comparison, but I have to reiterate it. It was the uncut gems feeling, like the Safdie brothers could make this into a movie to properly convey the ever-present stress and emergency that, like,
Yeah.
every how these people's lives are built on a house of cards, but the
Mhm.
house of cards has been built by government.
Yes.
It's not of their own making.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
I just first main question to let you just share your how did you, not in a cheese whip, but how did you decide to take this subject on, and what was that journey like?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things even that you just said that I'm like, wait, hold on, I want to,
Gone
because
very profound.
yeah, and yeah, so I am tempted to just say, just keep talking
Sure.
and just keep nodding along. But yeah, that dynamic of like my life is a house of cards, and that house of cards, it's not just this like Greek tragedy of being struck with this misfortune and this sort of individual harrowing journey. Yes, it is that, like, the humanity. It was very important to me to show the humanity, the full human, the complicated humanity of these five families who I was following over these years. But it was equally important to show, as you said, that their house of cards was built by something else, by someone else, like beyond their control. There was a wizard behind the curtain. Part of their desperation and their anxiety, I think, is not knowing who that wizard is, like this sense of powerlessness and sort of unknowing, like, how is this happening to me? I just can't piece it together. So, yeah, maybe we can return to that point. But how did I come to this? So, I actually came to it through my wife. Uh, my wife is a nurse practitioner, and she was working at a community health center.
The old saying behind every great author is a nurse practitioner.
She is the wizard behind my curtain. Uh, and yeah, so she was working at this community health center in Atlanta where we live. This is around 2018. And she just started to notice this trend that, like, patients she was seeing one after another, they were packing boxes at Amazon, they were working at McDonald's or Walmart, they were driving for Uber or Lyft, or they were even in these like caregiving positions, daycare workers, home health aides. And when they finished their shifts, they weren't going home to an apartment. They were going to a homeless shelter. They were, in one case, sleeping in a tent. They were uh, going to these extremely exploitative, what I think of as like commercial homeless shelters, for-profit homeless shelters called extended stay hotels.
Oh man,
And maybe
we'll
we
get
could
to
talk.
that. But
Yes,
I
yes,
that
yeah.
there is like a they are, and of course private equity. Not to I was like kind of reading, going, when does private? You know what I mean? It's like, when does private equity show up in this? Of course
Ah,
they
there
do,
it is. There it
right?
is.
But it is this like, it's almost like a villain that you're like, I wonder in this episode of the franchise will private equity show up?
Yes.
And of course they do.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And yeah, so like so she was stunned by what she was seeing. And when she
Sure.
told me about it, I was stunned. As a journalist, well, first as an anthropologist, and then more recently as a journalist who had been reporting and writing about inequality, economic injustice, around the world, I had read a good deal about homelessness. I had read books about homelessness, and I had never seen the link between employment and homelessness ever like explicitly discussed or unpacked. On the contrary, when work was brought into the conversation about homelessness, as in Peter Rossi's classic book "Down and Out in America" about homelessness, published in, I believe, the early '90s. He has this famous formulation that those who are homeless in America are disconnected from the world of work. And I think that was kind of my assumption intuitively, that like, yeah, I have a lot of compassion for homeless people, but like these kinds of, workforce development, like getting them into the workforce, getting them a job, that is the route to stability. And
Getting them off the government heat, because that develops a dependency.
yeah, well, I mean, yes, and that is like, it would be disingenuous of me to say like that was my assumption too. That, because like as a kind of good progressive person, I had rejected those kinds of conservative, pathologizing arguments. But I think even as a progressive, among very well-intentioned people who are liberal, there is this assumption that this person asking for money on the street like needs to go get a job. And And so, like, even this more well-meaning version was leaving out this entire population that my wife was seeing. And I started to wonder, I was like, is this some bizarre anomaly, or is this pervasive? And if it is pervasive, is it just Atlanta? Like, why is this happening? Where is this happening? And so it led me to write about one family in Atlanta for the New Republic magazine. I reported that over several months. And after I was done with that story, I was just like, I haven't even scratched the surface of all there is to like piece together and investigate. And so I ended up following these five families over about 5 years. But the time period in the book covers about 2 years. And yeah, I think it was just like that shock that the working homeless can even be a thing in this country, and how it at once, I think what was shocking to me, and as I've begun to use this term, and as the book has begun to sort of make its way, um, uh, into readers' hands, like what is so stunning, I think, is not only the ways that the term working homeless like explodes immediately our stereotypes and assumptions and myths about not just homelessness, but work too, because we have to look at both terms in that equation, working homeless. Like, what is it about the nature of housing that has produced this crisis, but also what is it about the nature of work and labor in this country that has produced this crisis? I think that's shocking, but also, like, I think it's shocking for people to realize when you use the term working homeless, what it says is that the line separating housed from unhoused in this country is way more permeable and porous than I think many of us would like to acknowledge. And I think that's really fucking scary for a lot of people. And so we make homelessness this thing over there somewhere with we segregate it spatially in skid rows to make it this sort of separate condition. And psychologically, we make it a condition where, at best, when we relate to it, it's through charity. It's not through the lens of justice and injustice or systems. It's through empathy, charity. That's at best. At worst, it's criminalizing, banishing. And I think working homeless just torpedoes all of that whole like sort of constellation of stereotypes and assumptions.
And of course, to what you're saying, the add-on I'd go is to people who read the book or to people who read about this, because what I found is even, and I am somebody who I can admit, I am very much I was a Biden guy. I mean, I gave money to various candidates, money to Bernie before voting for Hillary, but
The JL Super PAC.
yeah, no, it's a big one. Hey,
Yeah.
what'd you do with that $25, Bernie? It's but it's the way like, but this book and some other things have started to really kind of change that the way I think about these issues in terms of like I would say a pragmatic progressive is how I would put it. And I'm starting to believe that it's not radical to want bigger change. It's pragmatic to want more radical change. Like there are things that may seem radical, but it's like, I mean, but we have to do, we can't have millions of people homeless. We can't have, and when I hear
Yeah.
people talk about it, especially as a political issue, whenever somebody says we have to do something about the homeless, I hear get them out of here. I don't hear get them housing.
Yeah.
I hear they're interfering with my happiness. And
Yeah.
maybe somewhere in there is a sympathy, but it's really, I think, about I don't like their presence. I
They're
don't.
in my way. They're
Yeah.
in, yeah.
And
Yeah.
as far as choosing Atlanta, obviously you live there, but it felt like the city sort of was a good choice. Was there were you ever thinking about a different city? Because when you describe Atlanta, it seems like a perfect mix of gentrification, a Republican state, and I, as bad as books like Abundance have pointed to, like left wing states over regulating, leading
Yeah.
to kind of a slowdown in building and making things, which is a fair criticism.
Hmm.
Um, Georgia is a villain here as well. When you're
Yeah.
reading things about like all that, they're one of 10 states who don't do this. They're one like kind of proving their hardcore conservative bona fides. And I just thought, like, between all the things, and then Atlanta being a up and coming city,
Yeah.
like a new hot city, it sort of plays into the effect of like, oh, people love Atlanta. It's like, do you realize how bad the change is, like how much this has been impacting, like, kind of having the, much like Washington D.C., the credibility of like, oh, I'm in this black power city. The black is starting to fade because the power is becoming more important than that sort of cultural identity.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
DC, I mean, like I went to law school in DC, and in the 15 years, and I believe the one of the people you followed, the couple,
Maurice and Natalia. I was just going to say they, yes, they were in
I read
DC.
that
Yes.
part, and I
Yeah.
remember I graduated in 2004, and the area around the law school was like nothing.
Hmm.
And when I visited like 15 years later, an entirely new segment of the city had built. And I walked by to our hotel from Union Station with my girlfriend, and there was like one building that looked
Hmm.
like a building that existed 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And I said, that's got to be weird. Not being flippant, but I was like, is that like the last holdout that they're
Yeah.
probably trying to get out of here so they can build another 20-story rental building or luxury building? But
Yep.
in that time, in the time from me graduating law school to your book, I left DC, and so did Maurice and
Natalia.
Natalia. I'm so bad.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
the couple.
Yeah.
Um, and I was going, yeah, I saw that. Like, I have seen that exactly. That's exactly who got priced out and impacted from the, chocolate city,
Hmm.
where it's like now it's kind of, it's a brand, but it's no longer the culture
Yeah.
as much.
Yeah. So Maurice and Natalia, I mean, it's wild because,
They
yeah,
had it happen twice.
they have these deep roots in DC.
Right.
Their grandparents and great grand had actually fled the Jim Crow South, like millions of other people during the Great Migration, in search of economic opportunity in cities like DC. And so they were determined to make a life for themselves there. They get priced out, they get gentrified out of DC. They go from the chocolate city, or the one-time chocolate city, to the black mecca of Atlanta, thinking, okay, here we can achieve our middle class aspirations. And as Natalia later puts it, it's like they jump from the frying pan into the fire. And in that sense, to like get to the question of like why Atlanta, okay, so like on the one hand, Atlanta is really unique where housing is concerned. Atlanta, for over a century, has been this kind of laboratory for housing policy in America. Atlanta was the first city in the country during the 30s to build public housing.
Oh, that history. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I'm trying to convey when people are watching this that I will like almost take it personally if they don't buy your book.
I will too.
Because the Chick-fil-A, no, you can say that. That's okay. I've got your back. The Chick-fil-A guy
lived in a project.
housing, and then
Lived in the project.
and it was just, and it was like, it was another one of those like World War II era benefits that it's like, are
Yes.
you white and struggling? We've got your
We've
back.
got you. We've got
And
your back.
as soon as it's black people, you need public housing too. Fuck off. This place is a pile of shit.
Exactly.
It's unreal.
It's like, oh, what a coincidence that in the 60s, when public housing, when home ownership is being subsidized out in the suburbs, and the projects as they come to be, like become populated with the poorest of the poor, which are, which is Atlanta, like in many cities, black population. Oh, what a coincidence. That's precisely the moment where the funding for public housing, beginning with Nixon, is just absolutely decimated.
Right.
And then we have the audacity to call that the failure of public housing. Like it just failed. Who's to say why it failed? Who's to say why it became, these places that are just falling apart and just completely abandoned? Like, who's to say why? And yeah, so Atlanta was sort of a case study in that. But then in the 90s and 2000s, Atlanta becomes the first city in the country to begin demolishing all of its public housing in favor of this like neoliberal experiment in the government, as one of Reagan's HUD deputies put it, the government was getting out of the housing business, period. And what was taking its place were these public-private partnerships where the government is now trying to incentivize the private market through these housing vouchers to, okay, we're getting out of the housing business. You're the landlord. We will give you money. We will help subsidize these people who can't afford market rents. Please, will you house them? And so Atlanta became sort of the first city in the country to experiment with that. And so why Atlanta? Partly because of how unique it is. But the flip side of that, why Atlanta, is because of how representative it is. In that sense, I really could have done this in any number of cities. I knew I didn't want to do it in New York or LA or San Francisco because so much of our discussion of the housing and homelessness crisis is already centered there. And I think a lot of people think that like, well, I was going to say people think that it's limited to those areas, but actually, people across the country, I was just in Springfield, Missouri, giving a talk about the book, and they're like, this is happening in Springfield, this kind of like getting priced out of our neighborhoods, getting, it's not happening at the scale that it is in LA or New York, but it really is happening across the country. And just to pinpoint the dynamic, which you've alluded to, this is why Atlanta is just representative, because over the last decade, Atlanta has undergone this celebrated renaissance, this transformation of its urban center. And, property values are skyrocketing. Signs of growth are everywhere. Corporate profits are surging. Unemployment is at an all-time low. And poor and working class people are not just being pushed out of the neighborhoods they grew up in, but out of housing altogether. And I think it's just so, you know, perverse that really this is not a crisis of poverty. Um, this is a crisis of prosperity, a certain kind of prosperity. It's not the product of a failing economy. This isn't the recession of 2008. This isn't the foreclosure crisis. This is a time of like for many cities of unprecedented success. And in that sense, like it's the product not of a failing economy, but a thriving economy, just not paradoxically for the very people whose work, whose labor is powering that growth, powering that economy. These are not people on the fringes of our society. And so in that sense, the title of the book, There Is No Place for Us, which comes from Brit, when she's one of these people, she grew up in public housing. Her and her mom became homeless when public housing was
Oh, not
demolished.
Brit Hume.
Not Brit
Not
Hume.
Brit Hume. Okay,
Thank
I'm
you
sorry.
for no,
Yeah.
thank you for because that would have made for a very different kind of book. Um, uh,
He's kind of like an early stage Mitch McConnell. Like in 20 years, he'll sound like Mitch McConnell. Anyway, sorry.
Please don't bring Mitch McConnell into the sacred space
Yeah,
that
I'm sorry about that.
yeah, his we let us exercise him now. Brett, she grows up in public housing, and then as an adult, she actually gets one of those housing vouchers I mentioned, and she ends up losing the voucher because she can't find a single landlord who will rent her in this booming Atlanta, in this red hot rental market. Landlords have no incentive to take these vouchers. They'll only accept them when it's in their financial self-interest. And so she can't find anyone to accept it. She loses the voucher. The year she loses her voucher, about 1,600 vouchers were issued in just Atlanta. And how many expired because no one could find a landlord to rent to them? 1,100. So it's like that is this experiment that I talked about. That is the result of this experiment. It has just catastrophically failed. And a lot of that failure, again, is the product of this success story. And so again, in that sense, the title, There Is No Place for Us, that is not just an Atlanta title, that's a Chicago title, a DC title, a Nashville, Charlotte, Phoenix, New York, you name it. That is increasingly an American title.
And I do think one PR opportunity I think you're missing here is obviously if you could get Kendrick Lamar to do a reboot, There Is No Place for Us instead of Not Like Us, like that might. I'm just,
If you have an in, if you
yeah,
have
I'm
an
an ideas guy. I don't really produce things or get things done, but I'm sort of I just sit
Kendrick,
in
if
my
you're watching this,
yeah
yeah.
my think tank. This is JL's think tank. I wanted to bring up a book. And I was going to say there was a book I read probably 20 years ago, maybe a little more, called The Working Poor, and I think it was
Mm.
by David Shipley.
Shipler, yes.
Shipler.
Yeah, great book.
And
Great
I
book.
have Nickel and Dimed. I haven't read it yet. I've got like a whole now, like a new collection of like the history of poverty through great books
Yes.
section of my bookshelf. But the working poor, I just find it's such an interesting degradation we're on where it was the working poor and that was terrible because people were working and couldn't make ends meet, and now it's we've downgraded to the homeless, the
Yeah.
working homeless,
Yeah.
which is kind of the trajectory we're on. And I think when you mention the prosperity we have, I think I have a good amount of Catholic guilt. So when I have like great years in comedy,
Hmm.
especially during the pandemic, I'm just immediately like giving my money away. I'm just like
Hmm.
I don't this is I feel terrible
Hmm.
having like too much. It's a weird. I think it's Catholic guilt, or maybe I just don't want to be happy one way or the other.
Come
But
on, it's just a big tax write-off, right?
I guess yeah, that's true.
I'm
That's
just
true.
kidding.
Um, but what was I just had a brain. No, but
Yeah.
when you said people like under this time of prosperity, I feel like the more people get that piece of the pie, get elevated,
Yeah.
that's more people who don't want to see that go away either. The
Yeah.
more people that benefit from the system, then you've
Totally.
and those will be voters probably like a little more affluent, maybe more educated, maybe not, maybe they're just a clueless influencer. But the point is, they as that group starts to grow in sort of like comfort, many of them, I don't want to say all of them, but many of them are probably going to be like, well, I just bought my first house now,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
I definitely don't want some public housing or some Section 8 housing near me. Like, I just bought this. I'm
Yeah.
new. Why do I have to be the one to not, like, same with climate change, like developing nations saying, you killed the planet with coal for a century. Why
Yeah.
do we have to stop? We just got here. And it's an
Yeah.
understandable emotion, but I think it helps create more division or
Hmm.
strengthen the division, kind of. But,
Yes. I
but, oh
think
yeah, sorry.
a question. No, no, no. I mean, I wrestled with exactly that question throughout this whole process. And, another way of putting the question is like that began to sort of crystallize for me. This question was like, whose interests are served exactly by obfuscating and obscuring the root causes of this sort of mounting catastrophe, whose interests are served by us continuing to sort of perpetuate this story, this national narrative about who is becoming homeless and why. Um, whose interests are served by that, because it does serve a particular interest, I think, to make homelessness the product of like this personal pathology, personal failure, pure personal tragedy, mental illness, addiction, alcoholism. I mean, that serves a particular function, and what it does is it shields the rest of us from having to ask really difficult questions. And I say us advisedly because I really believe who this serves are, the interests of the American oligarchy. When Elon Musk, tweeted recently that homelessness is really just like a code word for, I forget what disgusting, words he used exactly, but, for like drug addled, psychotics out of their minds, and that's really what homelessness is. Like, he is protecting his own interest because if we begin to peel back, the layers on how we got here, like, we begin to get at something very profound about the American economy. The American economy when it is successful, when it is doing well, not the American economy when it's like on its way down and we're in a recession. But we look at the stock market, we look at these even unemployment numbers as like a measure of how we're doing economically. What we should be looking at is how many people are becoming homeless, how many people are lined up at this food pantry on a Saturday morning. How are
Yeah,
those lines doing?
that's a great point.
And so I just that narrative
What will
about
be the first publication? And pardon me if there's some like, super left publication that's doing this, but like, wouldn't it be great to have that be an index just along
yes.
with our other, it's not to say that the market doesn't matter, but imagine there was a homelessness index, a
And,
food bank
imagine if
index.
like on the news, how they have like the ticker, like how
Yeah.
how the stock market's doing, the Dow Jones Industrial. Imagine if there was like an index or a little note, like here's how many people had to, were lined up for 100 housing vouchers. Here's how
The
many thousands of
Goldstone
people.
metric, they're
The
going to call it.
Goldstone metric,
Yeah.
TM.
TM, thank you. Damn it,
Yes.
you beat me to it. Now I just lost it.
Yeah, but that, for since the 80s, so much of this goes back to the Reagan administration. Since the 80s, when mass homelessness first exploded in the US, there was this concerted effort on the part of those in power, which has really become a bipartisan project through successive administrations, a concerted effort to at once downplay the severity of the homelessness crisis and to sort of cover and obscure its root causes. And it was successful. By the end of the 80s, the New York Times and CBS News, they did a poll, random New Yorkers, what causes homelessness? The number one answer, psychological problems. The number two answer, a refusal to work, laziness. Not a single person mentioned housing. And so that propaganda effort was successful, and I think we're still living the consequences of that today.
Yeah, I mean, I've often commented that you can tell how bad we are as a country now, I think, because I look at Reagan and all the bad things that they sort of ushered in, but I go, but I get it. He was a charming, smooth talker.
Mhm.
Like, I do get it. Like, he was called the great communicator because he had a genuine charisma and charm. And
You wear a cowboy hat.
yeah, but
Yeah,
he did
yeah.
project at a time when people wanted optimism. At least he gave them optimism.
Yes, yeah,
He may have given them a horrible legacy, policy wise,
yeah,
but I look at Trump and I go, well, this is Reagan minus charm, like manners, minus any kind of, like, yes, I feel it's as if Reagan had said, get out there and beat up the nearest homeless man.
yeah,
And people would be like, yeah, like
yeah,
that's what we are now. Like
yeah,
somehow there's just been a total degradation, I think socially
yeah.
in our country.
I I fully agree, and I don't want to be glib about this because what we're seeing right now with this administration, I mean, I thought that it couldn't get any worse. When I finished
Yeah.
this book, I was like, it can't get worse. Like, surely, maybe by the time the book comes out, there will have been this national reckoning. And I mean, truly, like,
Or by the time you need to do a paperback update, you'll be like,
what
sorry to be a
was this
downer. Yeah,
crisis?
I wanted to have like a new addition to the book, like with some optimism, but it's like, I don't know, more cutting of basic services and needs to literally fund a tax cut for rich people. It's you don't have to be Bernie Sanders or AOC to be like, now they're basically laughing in our faces. It's
Yeah,
not like some nuanced, well, you've got to have, it's like, we
yeah,
want our rich people to have more money. That's it.
period. We
It's
want to.
very plain.
So it's like pouring gasoline on, and just to mix metaphor, just pouring gasoline on this just out of control catastrophe. One thing I point to in the book is that over the last couple of years, homelessness has been at the highest level on record. Like since homelessness began to be counted, it's been at the highest level on record. 2 years ago it was the highest, and then last year it beat that record. But what I'm showing in the book is there's this entire universe of homelessness that we don't see, that is not only out of sight because these people are living in.
And there's also, sorry to interrupt again, you also indicate these kind of time bombs that are ready to go off, and not like, we're not, kind of like climate change. Like, we're
Yeah,
very bad at helping people and dealing
mm,
with things medium and long term that require medium and long term solutions. But I think some of the housing you talk about, where they were like given an exemption, where it's like it's supposed to be 30 years and they were allowed to like start
yeah,
kicking people out after 15. But there was this, if I'm remembering
yeah,
correctly,
yeah.
it feels like, oh, and it's statutorily built in to get far worse.
It is. It is. I mean, so not only are the official numbers like
And
just
this laughter is like at the absurdity, not, of course, at the, it is like
it is.
morbidly humorous, because you're like, this can't be real.
Yeah, Kafka would be like, nope, this is too Kafka-esque. Like this is too, it's
I'm
too
nodding,
much.
but I have to admit, I think I have one Kafka book there that I haven't read yet.
All right, you got to read Kafka or just, um, but like, so not only are the official numbers on homelessness just like outrageously, low, like compared to the reality, I show in the book by cobbling together these different data sources that the true number is about 6 times greater than the official number. So, like here in
A lot
Georgia,
of those stats don't count, like you say, don't count. Like it's like, oh, you're in a hotel that's robbing you blind of every dime you have. You're not homeless. You have a covering. You are
exactly.
sheltered in some way, so you don't
Exactly.
count.
Yeah, I mean, you're not homeless in the right way. Even though the Department of Education counts students living in all these other situations as homeless, HUD, which determines sort of the homeless numbers and funding for families and individuals and resources, they have this very narrow definition. And that narrow definition, again, has been engineered. That is not like, wait, seriously? We define it that way? They are perfectly aware of how by narrowing the definition, they are narrowing the scope of the crisis. You
But I
can,
will say Donald Trump has consistently appointed a black man to run HUD. So I think he knows, like, it has the word urban in it. So like he knows that even if that black man has, no experience in that field, they are black. So he is
yeah,
on top of it.
is,
I have to be fair.
yes,
I'm a left wing guy, but you have to be fair.
yeah.
When Trump nails it, he nails it.
Yes, I mean his record first with Ben Carson, who had a very deep and extensive expertise on housing through being a surgeon.
He lived in a house.
He did live in a house. He did live in a house. Yeah,
Sorry, he's not an elite academic. He's got real world experience living in a house.
yeah, he didn't pay rent in that house, but like he did live in a house. So you have this whole world of homelessness that is just out of sight, that is not only not being counted, but I would argue is sort of being written out of the story we tell about homelessness. And then, as you mentioned, there's like between 12 and 13 million people right now who are at immediate risk of being pushed into homelessness because they meet what's called worst case housing needs, and they are classified as severely cost burdened. So yes, like this is not getting any better. But what I was going to say earlier is like I don't want to minimize how shitty and just like horrific what Trump and his people are doing right now to make this problem worse, like through cutting Medicaid, through cutting food stamps, through cutting housing aid. HUD's budget is about to be cut by like 40% if this budget goes through. So it is awful.
Sadly, those aren't the issues I believe that are really being quibbled over.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know that that's even Medicaid a little bit, but I don't
Yeah.
really think it's like I haven't heard anybody step up and say, no, no, don't cut SNAP
Yeah,
benefits.
they're
Like, I
more
haven't
worried
heard
about
that.
the deficit growing by, $4 trillion than they are that
Right.
people who, are going to be deprived of their medical care. So it is bad right now. But what the point I'm trying to get to is that I began this reporting during the first Trump administration and continued it through the Biden administration, and now we're back with Trump, and the circumstances that those I was writing about were living, they changed not at all, and uh and I
Spoiler.
and again, I don't want to be
Still get the book,
still get the book.
even though you spoiled the ending.
um I don't want to be try glib about this and oh, they're all the same, Trump, Biden. It's not true at all. But it is the case that welfare reform, which was catastrophic for the people I'm writing about in this book, that really, Bill Clinton ran on ending welfare as we know it, and he did.
Block grants are a nightmare because
Block
then
grants.
when Brian Kemp is deciding what to do with this grant money, he may or however it's done in Georgia, like the same. Didn't they do that also with Medicare, what Medicaid, when they were like that was the compromise that the Supreme Court made? They're like,
Yes.
you can't
Yeah.
require it, but you can make it like
Exactly.
they have
Exactly.
the ability to do with it what they will. And it's like, oh, good. So hopefully the evil libertarian type people will just out of the goodness of their heart help people who need it. And of course
Yeah.
they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So I really do believe that
One defense, and I'm sorry to interrupt, and I'll like
oh,
one defense that I always feel
yeah.
Clinton is like up there in my my home, not like where I grew up with like the Kennedys. Yeah,
Mm.
there will be no ill words spoken. But uh, I do sometimes defend Bill Clinton to people when I go, yeah, but he won. Like there was an element, like people kind of look back and go, we were like being steamrolled by the Reagan Revolution. Like
Yeah.
Bill Clinton won. That
Yeah.
counts for something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and to be fair, George H.W. Bush is probably, I think, the most sane, thoughtful Republican we've had. I don't know in a long time, relatively speaking, but
Yeah.
Clinton won. So I
Yeah.
think some of this triangulating that we love to mock now, and I get that there have been really negative consequences to it. You had to you had to win. You had to take control and take some power also.
Yeah. And I'm not I'm clearly not a politician. I'm not an expert on electoral strategy. All I know, as in my humble sort of attempt to just document what people
Sure.
are going through, is that the
Like I said,
abandonment.
my mom would be mad if I didn't just kind of at least lay a marker down
No, no,
for.
I get that. And I've been voting for Democrats myself just to out myself to everyone's surprise.
What?
Um,
See,
and
that
I
might be my mom calling me right now. I have a landline. It is my mom. Look
is
at
it
that.
really?
It
Is it
really
really?
is.
Wow. Can we bring her into the conversation?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That
Good thing
would
the
really,
answering machine's outside.
that is amazing. I should have my mom. We could have that. That would be a very different interview, I
Yeah.
think. Uh, I just do feel that we need to acknowledge that the abandonment, the engineered abandonment of the people I'm writing about in this book and the millions of people like them has happened across the aisle. That
Yeah.
has been a bipartisan thing, and I think that is what Bernie has been trying to sort of speak to and ameliorate. And I think that there are people on both sides of the political spectrum who feel that and see that, like, um, there has been just insane wealth accumulating on one side and just mounting deprivation on the other, not only in the scale of cities, but of the scale of our entire country. And that has not happened solely because of Republicans, as much as what is happening right now is truly just extreme sadism as far as the treatment of those who are unhoused or at risk of just people. And again, the people who are like actually powering our country are the ones who are going to be suffering from these cuts and policies. But yeah,
Yeah, once again, they're
yeah,
working. They're working homeless.
they're working homeless. Yeah. I
I
mean,
was.
yeah.
Yep.
No, I mean that I think that the fact that working is added to homeless is like it's like homeless is already a scandal in the richest nation in the history of the planet.
Yes.
But like you add working to it and it's like what the hell happened to produce it? And this we're not talking about like a couple of people here and a couple of people here. We're talking about about 4 million people right now. The vast majority of them are part of the low wage labor force. A low wage job in many cities is homelessness waiting to happen. And, you talked about like, it's not just a matter of like getting people off the street into housing, as important as that is, not arresting them. Like, what a shock that not arresting people is actually going to help this. It's not just a matter of what you do with people who are already homeless and how you get them housed. It's also a matter of preventing homelessness from happening before it starts.
Yeah.
Because in some cities like LA and San, they're throwing billions of dollars at this. And for every one person who's housed, another four people become unhoused. So it's like, how do we stop that relentless churn? And I know I'm kind of preaching right now, but at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about like, what seems radical is actually like pragmatic. And
Yeah.
I think that part of what needs to happen is we need to see the status quo as kind of radical in itself. Like it's the status quo in how we treat housing in this country that is truly bizarre and just mind-blowing. If you look at it, like as an anthropologist, our whole thing is making the familiar strange, taking familiar things and making them like weird to us. And nowhere is that more pressing than when
Like a
it comes to
Tim
housing.
Robinson comedy show.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, he is a great anthropologist in that sense. Exactly. And I just think we need to do that with housing. Like, how have we allowed this precious resource, just like a place to this basic human necessity to be hoarded up and then auctioned off to the highest bidder, and people, millions of people flung into what Carla Wells, a case manager in the book, calls the housing hunger games. They're just flung into that housing hunger games, left to fend for themselves, and we call that supply and demand economics. We call that the market. And and at best, when people are talking about housing, it's often, well, let's just let the market do its thing. Let's just deregulate the market,
Mm,
deregulate development so they could just do their thing. And yes, there is some truth to that. But what we need to come to terms with is not just, as James Baldwin said, how extremely expensive it is to be poor in this country, but how extremely lucrative and profitable all this insecurity has become for some, because there are entire business models that are now designed to capitalize off the precarity of the people I'm writing about. And until we really confront that, and how homelessness is big business now, private equity, they're not just buying up the housing that people live in, they're also buying up the very places that people are forced into once they lose their housing.
yep.
So it's like, this is not just about deregulation and letting the market do its thing. It's about having a paradigm shift in how we think about housing.
Right. It needs to be, I think, they talk about regulating the internet like a utility sometimes. I'm
Mm.
like, housing needs to be regulated like it's water.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it
Just not in
is
Flint, not how water was regulated.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. But I,
But
but
no,
I'm
exactly.
I'm going
Exactly.
to say a few things because I think I have had some times in my life where I have not lived month to month. And when I say month to month, I have been very frugal and saved a lot of money. So
Hmm.
I never have a feeling of like,
Hmm.
but I try to keep within a budget. So some months just as that's more of a mental exercise than it is like necessity. But it
Hmm.
was during the pandemic that I've always been a somewhat charitable person, but it was like when I had kind of a windfall,
Hmm.
it was the contrast of getting like a lot of success with my comedy work in a
Hmm.
time where I was just basically sitting at home
Hmm.
doing my day job from home and
Hmm.
seeing all these people struggling and lots of people dying. And
Hmm.
I just started giving a lot to charity. And this isn't for me to be like, I'm so great. It was like,
Hmm.
but I saw my mentality was, well, now I have more.
Yeah.
So I got to like help
Yeah.
somebody do something. So I don't want to sit here and it feels like this isn't me saying once again because there are people with barely anything who do tons. I mean, Pink, this woman Pink in the book is get her up for sainthood or a presidential medal of freedom if I'm ever elected president because that's somebody who has like a spirit
Yeah.
of generosity of
Yes.
kindness that you're just like this is a hero. This is a
Yeah.
hero walking among us.
Yes. Those
And
who and those who have the least to give are giving the most. Like,
right.
she's barely hanging on herself financially, and she's giving her last penny, to bail someone out of jail or to buy
Right.
them tampons. So yeah, I'm sorry, but keep going. But
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
Yeah.
But it was in my mind. Like I look at the country we are, and I have a couple other things to say, but I know we probably have like 10, 15 minutes because I could
Yeah.
now. I had said to you like, you got a half hour, and little did I know I could probably talk with you for three
I could keep
hours.
going. Let's keep going. Yeah.
But the like where we are, I think, as a society, because I think these are problems that we need to solve. We need to have a all hands on deck from the personal charity to the government policy level,
Mhm.
the same way I feel about climate change. And we see that there are, certain things have been affiliated with the left. So therefore you can smear good policy and
Mhm.
good things for humanity as some sort
Mhm.
of radical left nonsense. Now you followed 5 Black families in Atlanta.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when I look at crack and opioids as a good example of the change in language, the change in
Mhm.
treatment, the change in compassion. Um, do we need, and of course, I have to say this, um, until the face the perceived face of homelessness is like a white veteran or
Hmm.
something. Not that they don't exist, of course they do. But when the I do does that have to be like the front man for this issue till
Yeah.
people go, what are we doing? And because what I've seen, I mean, I say it, the crack epidemic, the opioid crisis. Those words,
Yeah.
epidemic sounds like some plague that's going to ruin us, and a crisis is like all hands on deck. We've got to help these
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And by covering 5 Black families, I think there's plenty of cynics, plenty of Republicans, maybe even some Democrats who will go, but there's like, those communities, they don't have the same values. They're not, and your book registers a sort of community and work ethic and
Mhm.
striving and just wanting to make ends meet. And
Yeah.
but this is a weird all encompassing question, because I sort of look at it as like a society where I feel like this book should be read in schools,
Hmm.
and in everybody should have a copy. And every time I read a book like that, I'm like, that's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I remember when they were talking about making the minimum wage, I'm of the opinion, and we'll get to, I have a big spoiler, not spoiler, but big thing to tell you at the end of this episode
Okay.
that I hope you appreciate. But
Okay.
it's
Did you get them to raise the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage?
I did. Now, like, to me, the federal minimum wage should be $20. I think
Yeah.
that's just a fair, and like, I know somebody can probably say it's like it should actually be 23.20.
Yeah.
Let's get an even
Yeah.
number
Yeah.
where it can actually
Hasn't
maybe
been
just
raised. It hasn't been raised since
09.
2009, which
Right.
2000. I mean, just unbelievable. Anyway,
7.25 an hour. I mean,
7.25 an hour.
that's
Like,
criminal. I said it in my book review. I go, that feels criminal. It doesn't feel wrong. It feels like a crime.
yeah.
In this country, you could work 40 hours a week and be like, I literally can barely afford to take the bus. Another thing, as I'm rambling,
Hmm.
like, I've been moved to this idea of like, the bus should be free.
Yeah.
Like, I take the bus a lot in my neighborhood, and I'm biracial. My girlfriend is white. We are the 1.5 white people almost always on the bus. Everybody else is black and brown.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my brother once said something to me, that he was talking about the bus, and he said, and he was saying this not as a cynic, he was saying this is the way people look at poor and the working class. The
Hmm.
bus is not there to get them home. The bus is there so the businesses don't have to pay to get them to work.
That's right. That's right.
And therefore, when I buy a 10-trip ticket on my phone with my credit card, and I get a little discount that I don't need, and then I see that the three
Yeah.
dudes leaving the restaurant at 11 counting the change to make sure they have the bus fare, I go, that guy definitely needs the discounted fare that I can
Mhm.
get simply because I'm just a little bit like, I'm at that next tier where a credit card and a smartphone are just part of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the last thing, I'm just literally emptying a kitchen sink on you. But I remember when the talk was the fight for 15,
Yeah.
and that had been going on for a while. And I remember getting into it on Facebook with a sort of friend who had basically just said, I mean, $15 to flip burgers, like, you really think they should get that? And I was like, first of all, that job sucks. So yes. And I said, what is the value that you think an hour of work? Because I guarantee you, with that attitude, you're definitely the person who will say, you just got to get off your ass and work and
Hmm.
put in the effort. There's opportunity out there. Then what is the value of the person who says, I'm not going to be a drain on society. I'm going to provide for me and or my family, and I'm going to do a job that a lot of people
Yeah.
don't want to do.
Yeah.
How can you tell me that that is not intrinsically worth a like $20 an hour wage? That job sucks, and we
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
benefit from it. And you're helping up the chain, make people millionaires and billionaires. And
Totally.
$20 an hour is not you driving a sports car down the street
Yeah.
to your penthouse apartment. That's just like, hey, honey, the two of us have jobs that pay us $20 an hour. We can afford a decent place and not fall into debt if we're responsible. And
Yeah.
nobody owes us more than that. If we want more than that, that's where this is the land of hustle and opportunity. But we fucking
Yeah.
do the work and contribute our share, and there needs to be something we are owed. for them,
Yeah.
and it ain't
Yeah.
7.25 a fucking hour, which
Yeah.
is an insult.
I mean, and like when we really unpack this sort of calamity of this housing and homelessness crisis, it's not just the like growing chasm between what people are earning and what it costs to have a place to live. It's not just the fact that since 1985, rents have outpaced income gains in this country by 325%. It's not just the fact that what the National Low Income Housing Coalition calls the housing wage needed to afford just a modest apartment nationally is $32 an hour. Like that's the national housing wage that's needed. So 7.25 an hour, $32 an hour. It's not just that chasm. I mean, wages are really important, but the reason we have the working homeless is because the nature of work itself has changed dramatically over the last couple of decades. We've, the gigification of entire sectors of the US economy.
I have said that no economy should run like a comedian's life.
Yes.
Like, hey,
Exactly.
oh God, okay, I'll get myself there, and you pay this much. Okay, well, if I sell some merch and travel on the 6 a.m. flight, I'll probably turn a profit. Gig gig economy,
And
terrible.
if I'm sick, if I can't show up, I don't get paid. Like that should not be our business. So exactly, like that has
The
become.
Lyft Uber, the Uber of it all. I remember you could watch the ads where it is such a the tech industry is so funny because it's like we're going to disrupt the economy. Look at everything streaming
Mhm.
cabs. We're going to basically use investment money to cover our debt as
Yeah.
we destroy and take over an industry. Then when we own the industry, will become worse than what we replaced. Like
Yeah.
the six streaming platforms I have is like as much as a cable package, like a
Yeah.
premium cable package.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
no, it's we are not in
It's
some
like
like
if Doge,
utopia.
it's like if Doge just like designed an economy. It's like we're gonna reform this and make it like much, much worse than it was
Right.
before. And exactly. So it's like that. I mean, the fact that like people don't have sick leave, people don't have health insurance, people that
In the book, health insurance, one of the people needs to get therapy and can't get it
yeah. And
because
even though she's
Georgia didn't
working like
extend
three.
Medicaid, right?
Yeah, and even though she's working like three jobs,
Right.
so we're talking about like we need work requirements for Medi. She's working like three jobs and she can't even get therapy because her health, her Georgia subsidized health insurance only covers eugenics, basically. It only covers contraception, sterilization. So like that is the reality that people are living with their jobs.
Or the woman who had 29 hours a week, I believe,
29
and 30 was the threshold
working
to
at
get
mopping
health
floors at
benefits.
the Atlanta airport, the pride and joy of Atlanta's economy, where all of us pass through all the time on, the person cleaning the bathroom when you go into the bathroom at the Atlanta airport is being given 29 hours a week because at 30 they would be eligible for health benefits and sick leave and things like that. So like it's not just that wages are at, I mean, levels that would be funny if it wasn't so cruel.
Yeah.
It's also just the nature of work itself. And that again, like needs like that is radical. It is radical what we have allowed the status quo to become. And it's actually very sensible and pragmatic to just say, that like what if we did things differently? Like
Yeah.
what if people could afford a place to live? What if we didn't allow landlords to jack up rents way beyond the rate of inflation, way beyond the rate of property taxes and insurance and so forth. We call that price gouging when there's like an emergency going on, like in LA after the wildfires. We
Right.
call that price gouging, but price gouging is what the status quo is, where just the private housing market is concerned. And so it's like all of that is radical, and it's actually normal and sensible and conservative or whatever, moderate to say, like maybe things could be a little different.
Yeah. And you bring up, I'm going to bring up this is my sort of two questions, and then I'll tell you my final point. But when I read Invisible Child by Andrea Elliott, which won the Pulitzer, if I could bet on DraftKings, who I think are going to be finalists for some of the big awards, I'd put my money down on your book.
Mm.
which by the way is here. I keep sorry my shoulders are so broad, but there it is, everybody. There's the book if you're watching on YouTube. But she had said she wrote about this girl Dasani because, and she wrote either in her preface or her author's note, um, because I knew I just like Ezra Klein sort of says, this book is for Democrats because I know they're at least listening.
Yeah.
And in her book, she said, I chose a child because if I did a story about adults, personal responsibility,
Yeah. Yeah.
values, life choices, they can run through all that. I mean, for Christ's sakes, Joe Manchin didn't extend the child tax credit. It was like he was living in 1984, New York. He was going, they might use it for drugs.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
but it just worked.
Yeah.
It literally just like shredded childhood poverty by like 40%. And you dusted off 1983 Republican talking points to not extend it.
Yeah.
But she chose a child because she thought this is like a rhetorical weapon. You can't say that a child has to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. So what are we going to do to help the children?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wondered if the idea of working homeless is kind of a similar thing where it's like, these are not people you can now. When I read the book, of course, there will be that argument from the same people who are saying we need more children, which makes you wonder, oh, what kind of children do we need more of? Because they would probably say, well, what is this single woman having 2 or 3 kids for if she can't afford it? So they'll become very selective, eugenics perhaps, in terms of where they want this growth of population.
We love more children, just not more of those children.
Right. And we don't want to provide for those children. But boy, oh boy, do we want to give baby bonuses. Can we pay women that we like to have kids, 5,000 a pop?
Yeah.
Why don't you just get 5,000 a pop right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially if you're a struggling parent.
Yeah. And by the way, we love children, but we're also going to force you to go out and get just a shitty job. Like taking care of your own child, that's not work. But if you go out and get a job where you're taking care of other people's children, that's work. That's noble. That is realizing the inherent dignity of work. But the work you're doing, taking care of your sick parent or your kid who's like that's not work. So it's like, I mean, there's so much just perversity across the board, and when these issues are tough. But I get your question. I think it's so important. You alluded to it earlier.
We're trying to eliminate a kind of talking point by saying, no.
Yes.
What are we going to do for the people who work hard and believe and want to achieve, and they're doing what you tell them to do? Are you going to help them? And I feel like the answer is no. And I'm sorry, I want the answer to be yes. But I feel like we're living in a country right now where the answer, and this is piggybacking off that, my question for you was, where do you see hope on this issue?
Yeah. Well, okay, so I do want to
19-part question I just asked. So just go in
I've been keeping track. I do want to address the first part of it. And you brought it up earlier also with like, does the white veteran need to become the face of homelessness for this to be? And what that speaks to is this long and pernicious tradition in this country, really going back to Victorian England, of distinguishing between the deserving and the undeserving poor. We've needed to sort of divide our impoverished people into those we can have sympathy for and those we can just demonize and brutalize and reject and imprison and so forth. And so I think you're absolutely right that like in focusing on Black families in this book, which by the way, like I went into this wanting to check all these different demographic boxes. I wanted to have this kind of, represent this plurality of backgrounds and race and perspective and all. And I wanted the white working class, person. And but I started showing up at those food pantries on Saturday morning. Every single person was Black. And in Atlanta, a city that's no longer majority Black, 93% of families who are homeless are Black. So like it would have been kind of forced to just go out, find out one family who's like white and, so it just wasn't empirically true.
Eminem of homelessness, if you will.
Exactly. In some cities, it's going to look different. I reported in Northern California where it's disproportionately Latino communities that are falling into homelessness. Uh, in Minneapolis, where I just was, it's a large indigenous and Native American population, and in other cities, it will be a lot of white people. Because this is a class issue in many ways, but the racialized aspect has a history. It didn't just
Right.
spring up overnight. Like we created that statistic through generations of dispossession, discrimination, displacement. We have systematically created that statistic of 93%. So that's not just like, oh, Brian, is just talking about black people, or like it is true that people of color are more likely to be homeless because we live in a racist country still. Like that's
Uh-oh, Nat, you've just lost. No, you've just lost
feel free
people.
to edit the interview right up to that point.
You've lost people because um, we don't live in a racist country, and I'll prove it by deleting all references to history that show racism.
Yeah, yeah,
Very overused phrase, but Trump, without ever having read a George Orwell book, incredibly Orwellian. Like it's
yeah.
such a cliche
It's
at this point, but it really is.
I mean, the
Really
national
is.
parks now, like people can
Mm.
like leave comments if they're uncomfortable with a reference to like a massacre of native people that happened here. Like, so yeah, maybe people can leave comments on this video telling us what you're uncomfortable with, and we will excise.
I'll do a trigger warning before the
Yes.
episode
Yeah.
also.
So anyway,
Yeah,
that face of homelessness that I'm presenting, like, yes, I would have loved to appeal to Uncle Johnny, who really wants to see like the white veteran represent, and that is true. There are veterans and there, but this particular, but like it is what it is, and it has a reason. There's a historical
yeah,
uh 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 it was produced by history in many ways. But but that deserving undeserving distinction, it's so pernicious. And I think a lazy and kind of misguided reading of this book says, ah, thank you, Brian. Thank you for giving us the working homeless, this invisible population, because these aren't the people we're running into on the street. We can continue to hate them. We can continue to brutalize them and round them up. But, oh, these parents who are working their asses, oh, I'll have sympathy for them. That is not what the book is doing. They're all connected. What
right.
we see, what we don't see. It is this whole spectrum of insecurity that we have created as a society. You might have a job today, and tomorrow you're in a tent. Like that is the continuum that people are on. Michelle starts with a Santa hat on at the beginning of the book, and by the end, because she's making Christmas Eve dinner for her kids, by the end of the book, she would be mistaken for someone who is just chronically homeless on the street. So like it's a continuum of experience. And I don't talk about the working homeless because I'm like, okay, let's have more sympathy for them. Let's finally tackle this issue. It's just to say again empirically, like there's this entire mass of low-wage workers in this country who are homeless. And like that's a reality. That's just an
Yeah.
empirical reality. And uh and we need to grapple with that. And we need to grapple with the fact that like the source of that is the inability of poor and working class people to have access to housing they can afford. Because like I don't know if you've heard this thing, there's a book called Homelessness is a Housing Problem, which is really great. It's very data heavy, but what they're basically doing is
There's
saying,
also a song, "A House Is Not a Home," I believe. So,
yes,
but yeah, but not
uh,
really on topic.
I was trying to do something with that. Uh, so what they argue in this book basically is like you want to attribute skyrocketing homelessness to addiction and mental illness. Well, how come in West Virginia or in other
Right.
places in Appalachia where opioids are running rampant, where poverty rates are high, where mental illness is much, much higher, how come you don't have homelessness in the way you do in these rich
Right.
cities? It's not because they're not liberals in those cities. It's because housing costs are not outrageous. It's because because rents are closer to what people are earning, because people have access to housing, even if it's really decrepit housing, they are housed. And so that is the variable. The variable is not having access to safe, dignified, affordable housing. And so that is what I hope people walk away with. Not, okay, the working homeless, now I've discovered a group that I can feel bad for, and I'm going to change. It's like, it's that, even people on the street. A study recently showed that about 40% of people living on the street and about 50% of those in shelters, so those who are officially counted, they themselves are in the low wage, like formal workforce. So the working homeless is not just the invisible phenomena. This is homelessness in America, and it's actually existed for decades. This is not a new thing. What is new is just the sheer magnitude and
Yep.
scale. And that's what we have to confront, I think.
I the only other point I was going to bring up that, and your book did this for people that I will presumably not meet, but I remember in Invisible Child, a story she had. One of my train stops when I lived up in the Bronx, I would sometimes get off at the A train on 207th, like the last stop on the A
Mhm.
in Inwood, and reading it, like the girl's grandmother, I want to say, like cleaned that train station.
Yeah, yeah, I remember.
And I just remember thinking, like, and this person was struggling and they had a job with the MTA, like,
Yeah,
and I was just I was like, I probably just was like, oh, hey, she got it, like, oh, good, then she's cleaning the station, not knowing, like, oh, that's not, of course I never thought that's a great job, but like now you're like, that person has a job with the city of New York, and
yeah,
and she and her family are struggling.
yeah, yeah,
And like a month or two ago, I remember I just gave this guy. I always have this. Sometimes I don't think I have cash on me, and the guy was like, can you spare some?" I was in Midtown Manhattan. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have anything." And then I walked. I said, "Oh wait, I do have some." Like, this is one of those random times I have cash. So I gave him a 10,
hmm
and the man hugged me, and I was like, okay, either I'm low T and I need to watch more Joe Rogan podcasts, or this is a profound, like, to make someone who is on the edge, whatever that meant, whatever, if he was starving and was going to go get lunch. And I
yeah,
don't even care if this was definitely not somebody on drugs who was like going to get their fix. This was somebody who was like, I haven't eaten in a
hmm
day or two. And I was just like, this can't be. Like you've said, this can't be.
yeah,
It just can't. And
yeah.
I say that to say, and then my final statement, my final question for you is, do you have hope? Do you
That's what
have,
you did
like, yeah,
ask
yeah.
me.
Is there a place where you look and go, I think, or are you in a more cynical, understandably position where it's like, well, eventually it will get bad enough that something will have to happen, which is like
Yeah,
the much less hopeful version of inevitably something will be done, but you'd rather it happen, in 2026 or something,
yeah,
not in 2033 when the revolution happens.
yeah, exactly. I mean, yes, I do have hope. And conservatives sometimes, beginning with Reagan, would say like homelessness is a choice. And I think they're right. Homelessness is a choice. It is a policy choice.
Yeah.
It's not this like personal choice. Homelessness is a societal choice. It's a choice that we collectively have made through our policies. And that gives me hope because it means that if we can create this crisis through our policies and through this through decisions that we have made as a society, then we can unmake them. We can uncreate this crisis. I think it gives me hope to remember that this is a relatively new phenomenon and it hasn't always been with us. Contrary to the Bible, like the homeless will not always be with us. Like, sure, there will be one person here, another person that, who for different reasons is like not living inside. But homelessness on this scale, with these sprawling encampments, with this entire invisible population of workers who don't have housing, this has been produced. And that gives me hope. It means that it can be unproduced, uncreated. And what gives me hope is the fact that during the pandemic, when millions of people were at risk of being evicted, tenants got together and formed a movement and forced policymakers to take it seriously to the extent that like an eviction moratorium went through the CDC. And even to have an eviction moratorium frame, as a public health concern, like that housing is healthcare, is a really to me is a source of hope. And that prevented millions of people from being pushed into homelessness. So, like, I think that it's going to come from the bottom. I don't think that even the most visionary politician is just going to wake up and say, I'm going to tackle that. I think it's going to come from pressure from below as that 12 million, 13 million, 15 million people in this country who are on the brink of this themselves say no more and begin to see their plight in rightly political terms, not as like, oh, I just need to work harder, or oh, how did I mess up that I lost my home because rents went up by 60%, but to see them in political terms as a political issue in the same way that like healthcare has been rightly politicized.
Right.
That gives me hope. I do think that things are just unbelievably bleak right now, but we saw last weekend the number of people out in the streets say, like, in the midst of that horror that we're seeing, it is hopefully spawning resistance in equal measure and at scale. And so that does give me hope. And just and as much as I appreciate those who are willing to give financially, I just like I try to give whenever I see someone, asking me for money. Sure, you can have my money, or whatever I have on me. I appreciate that. I appreciate charity, but I do think that we have been caught in this blackmail where homelessness is we've been given a choice of either charity or just brutalizing people, charity or demonizing people. And I think we just have to break out of that. Like, we are not going to get out of this crisis through charity. We are going to get out of this crisis when it is rightly identified as a matter of justice and injustice, when it's rightly recognized as a matter of, like, as a question of what kind of city, what kind of country, what kind of economy do we want? And and are we going to build that kind of society? Can we build differently? Can we make our city a different kind of place? That goes beyond the question of kind of personal charity. This is a systemic problem. We got into it for systemic reasons, and we will only get out of it when our systems begin to look a little bit different.
Agreed. So what I was going to say to wrap this up, and everybody, can I reach you with my alligator arms? That's why I wasn't D1. Here it is, everybody. Oh, there it is. Now it's not reflecting the light. It's a phenomenal book. And the thing I wanted to say, there were two things. About a week after I finished reading, or 2 weeks after I finished reading your book, a job listing went up for a staff attorney in the Bronx, or for staff attorneys in the Bronx and I was literally saying to my girlfriend, I was like, I'm a 46-year-old with like up and down legal employment history, but how would I just be like, I would like to work in this field? And this job for a staff attorney in the Bronx working with like low income landlord tenant court popped up. So sent my resume. I may or may not have an interview. Of course, this will end possibly with just like, yeah, I didn't get it.
All right.
I just thought it was such a moment of like, huh. And I just sent it, and they submitted my resume for it. So I was going to say,
that gives me hope. That is awesome. Forget about Kendrick Lamar. Bronx
and you also
legal.
said started from the bottom before your last answer, and I was afraid you were going to say, and now we're here. And that would kill our chances of getting Kendrick Lamar. Quoting Drake would really impede our kind of celebrity angle.
That is awesome to hear. And we need people with a heart like yours. And
I'm a terrible lawyer, so that I don't want to. I might just be there to comfort them when I lose their case. And this is all humor. Anybody who's interviewing me, if you're hearing this podcast for some reason, this is called jokes.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Forget about Kendrick Lamar watching this. Whoever is going to hire JL, hire him. We need people like him.
6'7", 300 pounds. So worst case scenario, I can then, even if I lose in court, I can go shake down the landlord after.
Exactly.
an all-encompassing legal services approach,
I love it. I
both
love
legal and illegal. That's how all-encompassing my approach will be. But so my questions for you, until I got that call back just to have my resume submitted, was going to be like, how on a local level can someone like me help?
it.
I feel like if I were to get that job, I'd be like, I guess I'm helping. I'm
Yeah.
doing my part, and I can keep, talking about the issue. But the other thing is, my congressional seat is not technically open yet, but my congresswoman just won the nomination for the gubernatorial nomination for the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
And so the other thing that I am thinking of, because the three issues that I would want to bring, I think there needs to be a national housing crisis declared. That
Yes.
ain't happening under a Republican. But just the
Yes.
same way, I wish we could be in a position to say, hey, Trump, Republicans, border crisis, I'll vote for it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're so interested in protecting Americans and keeping Americans safe, I want a housing crisis declared also that will speed up building, that will speed
Absolutely.
up funding to places.
Absolutely.
Can we do that? Is anybody have the imagination to kind of say, hey, Trump, there's a lot of working class people, and some poor people who voted for you. This is a win-win. You got my vote on the border. This is the nature of politics. There is a border problem. Do I think you're the guy for it? Absolutely not, but whatever. But if we could get a housing crisis declared also, get some of your real estate buddies involved, but that we can address this problem. So on a national level, the three things I care about are climate change, housing crisis, and elder care. So that'll be just my big thing. But on a national level, what could somebody running a 1 in a million congressional campaign to go to Congress in 2026, what could they do on a national level? Because a lot of these issues seem to be state related.
Yeah.
But what on a national level, beyond becoming president and declaring a housing crisis or emergency on a federal level, what are the things that maybe at the federal level could be done to aid the states? Because a state like Georgia seems like they would just stand there and go, you're not telling us what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so much. It's like if you want to address the upstream factors, the things that are pushing people into homelessness, and you want to prevent homelessness from happening, you have to be talking about tenant rights. You have to be talking about eviction defense, which is why if you get this job, I mean, anything that we can be doing to keep people in the homes they already have is absolutely essential. And that's how we will stop that churn that, again, like sees 4 people become homeless for every 1 person who gets housing. But I mean, I think what I would love to hear a national politician talk about, which and some have, AOC has, Cory Booker's talked about this, Bernie has talked about this, Elizabeth
I think you need a fresh face who's funny and cynical to do it.
Absolutely.
Cory Booker, I love him. I voted for him. Too earnest.
Yeah. Hey, JL, as a journalist, I'm supposed to be objective, dispassionate, and I'm certainly not supposed to say who I'm voting for, but I would vote for you if you ran. So
that would be voter fraud, by the way, because you live in Georgia. But okay, I'll take it.
Hey, that's what we do in Georgia, right?
I just need 1 vote from Brian Goldstone. Can you do that?
Hey, we're over in Fulton County, stuffing the ballot boxes. But what I would love, I mean, social housing for me is my North Star. As someone who cares very deeply about these issues, social housing is just public housing done right. It's public housing without all the stigma, public housing that wasn't set up to fail, that wasn't defunded and left to deteriorate. That is social housing has thrived in Vienna. It's thriving in Singapore. There are other countries that are doing this because the housing crisis really is a global crisis. Like the financialization of housing becoming this asset class, that is happening across the world. And
we tell Trump, he probably wouldn't like this, but his son-in-law is like a slumlord, so they're not above owning lower income housing. What if somebody could just get to Trump and say, I'm down with your border crisis, and you know what? For the next 2 years, I won't say a word about trans athletes. I'm still going to defend trans people, but I'll give up on sports. Housing crisis, and you get to put your you get to like you get to be like the Trump houses, the
Yeah.
Trump, and imagine all the black and brown votes you'll get if those things are run well. Imagine
Yeah.
those numbers that people said Republicans
I
couldn't get.
Yes,
Those,
yes. I fantasize about the same
I
sort of
know.
thing, but I mean the limit here I think is that social housing when it's done right is
Local.
is removed from the realm of speculators and profiteers. And that is where that is where he lives. That
We'll
is
give all homeless people meme coins.
yes. Hey,
Is that
let's
better
start
than
there.
housing?
Let's start with crypto. But it really when it is removed from the realm of profiteering and speculation and where people's ability to stay housed is dependent on just the fluctuation and whims of the market and what landlords, my investment is now increasing in value, so I'm going to sell it. It has to be removed from all of that, and that's what social housing is. And we need millions, not hundreds of thousands, but about 7 million social housing units. And these are, complexes, apartment complexes where people across income levels can live
Yeah.
there. And you can stay there even if you get a promotion and you start making more money. There's a fantastic article in the New York Times Magazine by a friend, Francesca Mari, about it was called like Inside the Renter's Utopia of Vienna. And it's just this great look at what social housing is and how people aren't like anxious from one year to the next. Is my rent going to skyrocket and I'll be homeless? Like, but that's, homeowners have that assurance. We know that with a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, like I know what I'm going to be paying for housing from one year to the next. But like renters don't have any of that security. So social housing,
And I'll
that
be
is,
running as a renter, by the way. I don't own where I live. So,
and
all the
and even
suburbanites will hate me.
and even having that identity, I mean, there are like I forget the number, like something like 50, 60 million renters in this country, just a huge number, maybe more than that. And it's this huge class of people. It's become kind of a permanent renter class, no hope of ever becoming a homeowner. And we need political leaders who will speak to that condition. And so that's what I would love to hear. I think that there's all sorts of concrete policies that could be enacted today, even through executive order, to ease the suffering. And so I think there's a lot that can be done.
Right after he takes away their health care and their food.
And yes, exactly. And it's all connected. That's why it's
Oh
so
man.
lucrative. But
Yeah, and I wish I could be more, but as soon as you say social housing, I go, sounds great. Socialist housing, done. They've immediately turned into they want socialized medicine and now
yeah,
socialized housing.
yeah, I mean, we call it social housing, or they call it because public housing is so
Right.
demon. I call it
Right.
whatever. Call it. I don't come up with a better. Come on, like what can we call it that won't have that kind of ring to it?
Boarding home. No, that's not good.
Workhouse. No.
Shanty town. No, that's not it.
Yeah.
But
I
yeah,
mean,
that I mean,
call it like I don't know, suburban house. Like just
it's
put
unfortunate branding is so it's like important now instead of just the crux of the issue. It's like how do we spin this? We call it
yeah.
right. Public housing
Or
is
just
fine.
house it, just
Yeah.
like how, I mean, that's why people call affordable housing and like workforce housing, because workforce gets people, it pulls at people's heartstrings or it seems more sympathetic. Yeah, I agree. Social
Blue
housing,
collar buildings.
yeah. American housing, just whatever.
Patriotic living. Yeah.
All right, we should have ended this 5 minutes
Yes.
ago.
Yeah.
This is
No,
going
thank
off the
you. This is
rails.
unbelievable.
No,
You should be, I hope, I'm sure you are, but you should be so proud of this book. This is a impactful book, a meaningful book. I think it's the kind of book that I want to read an article where it's like some, senators have it on their desks and are using it as like, a North Star to like impact change because you can't read it and not be impacted. And you see it plainly. And you did such a great job both evoking emotions and connection to the people, but also laying out very clearly the policies that yield this. And in some cases, it's as crazy as I live in a home, and then they sold it or reclassified it.
Yeah.
Now I'm homeless. I have a
Yeah.
job and I had a home 1 month ago. I still have a job and now I have no
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I did an event in DC during this book tour a few weeks ago with one of my heroes, an incredible person named Sarah Nelson. She's the head of the flight attendant union.
oh, yeah,
She's
yeah,
just
yeah.
this labor dynamo. And she had this great line that in retrospect is almost like I would like to think of as like the guiding orientation for the book. And what she said is, before we can fix the crisis, we have to feel the crisis. And she said that's what the book allowed her to do. And that is my hope. My hope is that, people who read this book and just follow these families on their journeys and just sink into their stories with them, that they will feel this in a way that even gets beyond some of the abstractions and statistics, and they'll just, and even people who think they know about these issues will sort of encounter it anew, and be shocked again. And so that's what I hope. I hope that people will feel this crisis in a very visceral way by opening this book.
Well, that's great. It certainly did that for me. So,
Thank you. Thank you.
um, I hope I get an A for effort, even if I don't actually get hired for the job.
I will be praying. I will be praying. And JL, I just want to say, because this is by far one of the most like interesting, nuanced, careful discussions. I'm so appreciative of the chance
Yeah,
to.
I'm brilliant. I mean, your book is good, but I am just an intellectual powerhouse. So
I'm not
I
going
didn't
to
want to have
argue
to
with
say
that.
it, but
Not going to argue with that.
You led me there, so I have to say it. No, thank you. A real honor to have you here and to take time out of your schedule. Good luck with the rest of the book tour, but it's one of those books that it's great as reading, and I think it hopefully will be great as, I don't want to put it, I think one of your book reviews, I don't want to steal this, but they make likened it to The Jungle by Upton Sinclair.
Yeah.
That's like that's the Michael Jordan of, like,
Yeah.
impactful journalism, even though that was
Yeah.
obviously done via fiction.
Yeah. It's so
So
fun. And I know we've already gone way over, and there's probably nobody sort of still watching at this point.
yeah, I missed my interview for the job in the Bronx, so they just
You
told
just
me I'm
lost the
not
job.
getting it.
I
Yeah.
just want to end by it's so funny you mentioned the jungle. Someone posted on Blue Sky the other day that this quote from the jungle by Upton Sinclair, for them encompassed like what was going on. And I just want to read this quote. I typed it out and I printed it out just to put on my desk. And it says, and this is like what the people are living in this book. They were beaten. They had lost the game. They were swept aside. They had dreamed of freedom, of a chance to look about them and learn something, to be decent and clean, to see their child grow to be strong. They had played the game and they had lost. For all the help it gave them, the vast city in which they lived might have been an ocean waste, a wilderness, a desert, a tomb. And it's like that is, yeah. So to have
That's
the
actually my quote describing my comedy career. I think I need to talk to this Upton Sinclair. Might be stealing my work.
a desert, a tomb. No, but that is what people are living with. So yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Follow Brian, and even more importantly than his social media follows, buy the book, buy it for someone, continue the conversation. And, when the time comes to donate to my political campaign, know that I will be a warrior for the themes in this book.
Yes.
And then pocket the money when I lose the election. I just have to be upfront about that. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Brian. A great pleasure. Thank
Thanks,
you.
JL. Talk to you soon.
Well, how about that? I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it thought provoking. I hope you realized that I recorded it like a week ago, so that things that may have sounded hypocritical about me going, don't talk about that, don't talk about that, and then I talk about it at the end going forward. Okay, guys? Sometimes we record out of place. I should have a punch down of the week. I just remembered. I forget. See, I'm out of practice, folks. The punch down of the week is for some people their favorite part of the podcast. And this isn't really a classic punch down of the week. I apologize because I just remembered that I needed to do a punch down of the week. I'm busy. This is my lunch break from day job. It is, to paraphrase White Men Can't Jump, it is hard goddamn work making someone so talented look like such a failure. But I'm working hard, lots to do. Yeah, this person just annoyed me. This isn't really a punch down of the week, but I posted a video from this week's Making Podcast Great Again. And this person who has commented 7 times, he just wrote, "Why are you not wearing the wig? The wig is the focal point of Trump's person." And I was just like, you need to stop being a fan of mine immediately. I was like, please, there are so many bad content creators. Go find them. Go, for every, I have a lot of ugly duckling fans, okay? A lot of ugly duckling fans. Go find your swan. I'm not it. I'm a comedian. I make good stuff. You want to hack. I want you to go and have lots of internet hack babies together. Go. Get out of here. I'm not the comedian for you, okay? Deuces. So the video is so much more engaging, but I understand not everybody can sit and listen and watch J.L. Cauvin for 2 hours. And I include among those people my girlfriend, my family, fans of mine, really anybody. So I assume if you're not watching the YouTube, you don't know that I just did like some millennial cute photo pose. Anyway, special review this week, guys. I watched David Spade's Dandelion on Amazon Prime. Now, I've always been a big fan of David Spade, the actor, David Spade, the sketch comedy person, the sardonic commentator. He had a show on Comedy Central, I believe, for a couple seasons. It was basically him doing a very witty, snarky recap of pop culture and things like that. Always enjoyed that about him. Always thought he was one of the best at it. But I remember several years ago, I bought a stand-up album of his. I was like, I love David Spade. Let me get his album. And I was very underwhelmed. And that may sound like an insult. I guess it is, or not the kindest thing. But to me, just because you don't crush it at stand-up comedy does not mean you're not funny. There are tremendous comic actors who aren't stand-up comics, but they do great work with their skill set. That's kind of the impression. I mean, I know he tours with Nikki Glaser a lot, and she, on the other hand, I think is an absolute, powerhouse, and that's not breaking news. I've been a big fan of hers for a long time, but usually like from the shadows going on. But David Spade is obviously a big celebrity and a funny guy. But I said, let me give Dandelion a chance. Let me see. Maybe it's maybe it's. And it's still it's funny. It's a little more than the thing I bought many years ago. I just didn't like. It felt very stale. It felt very like you got to keep up with the internet if you're going to be a stand-up comic. You can't be like a Bill Maher where it's like, I'm a comedian for people who don't. I'm talking about his stand-up shows. I took my mom is a fan. I took her to a stand-up show of his years ago. And it felt like this is good comedy for people who watch Bill Maher's show, maybe watch a little bit of late night TV, but don't go to comedy clubs, aren't big on social media, because he was saying things that felt like, oh yeah, this is like 5 months behind the cycle of social media. But if you're somebody who's like, I'm not into social media, you in a way that's kind of a blissful ignorance. You can enjoy stand-up comedy the way it used to be, when it was arguably a better profession or art form. But Spade, it was better than that album. But I'd say there was only one bit or story that really got me laughing, and it was about him attending a fundraiser for Haiti that Sean Penn was putting on, and how he was kind of goofed into bidding way higher for the gift. That was really funny. Like, I was laughing. I wasn't just going like that bullshit where I go, well, that's a good one. That's a good one. I was laughing. I was enjoying that. And there's a lot of good dry stuff, but it's if you're wanting it to be as funny as David Spade, like doing panel discussions or SNL, for whatever reason, it just doesn't meet that level. There are a few bits that are really good, and there's some really dry stuff that's good. So it's like modestly enjoyable, but it's just kind of like, that's the second time I've kind of hoped, like, come on, David Spade, give me the A+ stuff. Give me the Tommy Boy. Give me the SNL. Give me the Comedy Central pop culture snark. And it falls a little short. He is cognizant of some things where he kind of points out, like, hey, we just had Christmas, or I don't know, Christmas is coming up whenever they actually have this come out. Little things like that. He's a funny guy. That's the thing. He's funny, but as a stand-up, it's just it's funny actor doing stand-up. It's not funny stand-up doing stand-up. Is kind of how I would critique it, I guess. But I did, it's free. If you have Amazon Prime, it's free. But for Christ's sakes, I know most of you haven't even watched my special Half Blackface on Amazon Prime. Also free. In fact, why don't you do that this week if you haven't watched it? Half Blackface, Amazon Prime, great special. Then get back on your computer, which is the only place you can leave a 5-star review for it, and log into your Amazon account and go, I loved it. So good. Great. 5 stars. Send, upload, whatever you do. So that's it. That's this week's episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some laughs, and I hope you get the book by Brian Goldstone. It's a moving book. It's a great piece of sort of societally changing journalism, I hope. So that's it, everybody. Thanks for listening or watching or doing both. If you liked this episode, leave a review, do all that stuff, watch my special, etc., etc. But share it with somebody. Maybe this is the episode that you go, oh, I think you'd really like my buddy or this comic I'm a fan of. Really good stuff. I don't know. This isn't that embarrassing, right? For you to share, like nobody will think you're weird if you share like a podcast you like. People always do it to me. I always get annoyed when they tell me you should really listen to this. I'm like, well, I'm kind of busy with my 2 jobs and making my own 2 podcasts, but I'll check it out maybe. Are you doing that for me? Could you do it for me? Could you send my shit someone's way while you're at it, while you're bombarding me with more things to consume and as I'm trying to create? Thanks. Anyway, I'm yelling at my window, by the way. Was that believable? Was that some good improv acting? Did you think there was a guy or girl standing right there that I was shitting on? It's called talent, folks. So on that note, hope you have a stay cool. I'm starting to grease up a little bit. It's because I have to turn the AC off in the studio so that it's not making lots of noise, disturbing your listening displeasure. So have a good week, everybody. Have a good weekend whenever you listen to this. I appreciate you being listeners or watchers, subscribers, etc. And I will see you next Thursday.